Okay, awesome. Okay, so just for those who don't know, my name is Adina Barlow. I am a life coach who teaches you how to have an amazing relationship with yourself so you can have a wonderful relationship with everybody else. Today's class, we're going over how to support somebody who is in an emotional crisis and be able to hold space for them and support them without getting wrapped up in it yourself. And so if you want more information, you could go to adinabarlow.com, find some podcasts and other offerings there. And so what we'll do today, first of all, is go over the mental model that I bring to the emotions in general. So that is, instead of using the model of right and wrong, good and bad, it's a model of feelings, needs, and strategies. And so it's easier for us to see ourselves and other people as just that, as humans, instead of enemies or gods, or, instead of like putting them on a pedestal or putting them below. It's easier for us to see our shared humanity when our own mental model is one of recognizing our shared needs and feelings, and that all of those are okay. And so as we practice, we're just going to bring that to the table to see, like, there's nothing wrong with our emotions. There's nothing wrong with other people's emotions. They're emotions just like, the leaves and the branches on a tree are there and they have a purpose. So are our emotions. They all have a purpose, and our needs, and they're totally good. They're fine. And it's really the judgment about those emotions that creates like lack of safety and connection, so it's harder to support each other. So what I would love to do is have one or two people who would like to volunteer and share your story of an emotional crisis, so that we can kind of have an image to work with as we learn about how we would support somebody in that scenario. Is there anybody who would like to share a story? You can raise your hand, or you can just pop on and say so. All right, Katie, awesome.
Well, I have several. It's just like now choosing which one to use. Maybe the most significant one was the car accident that I was in. It was definitely an emotional crisis, and I actually was really aware of how others were trying their best to help or support me in that emotional crisis, and it was just interesting because everyone had different strategies on how to do that. And I definitely felt supported and held and comforted, supported, all of those. That was huge because you're in shock and you're confused and you're flooded with so many emotions of, oh my God,
totally.
I could have died. Oh my God.
Yep.
Did I hurt anyone? Scared, afraid, fearful, anxiety.
Sounds like some guilt was in there. Did I hurt somebody?
Yep. Guilt, anxious, anxiety, overwhelmed.
Anxious.
Totally overwhelmed. I mean, the array of feelings that you could have, those all would be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So as you were, this one's a little interesting. I love it. I love that you bring it. And because we're kind of looking at how others could have supported you better, or maybe how they did show up really well. So tell me with that, what is a way that people typically showed up for you that, I guess what was like the normal way that folks showed up for you?
The normal way or the most common way people may show up? Common way people show up.
Well, for you in this scenario.
Yes. And the typical thing that most people would say is that you're okay. Everything's okay. Everything's going to be okay. Yeah, no, I mean, yes. And I took that in and I received it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the way they are help comforting me. And no, I'm not okay. Like in the moment, that's not, no. I mean, yes, I'm alive. And that was the another thing was like, oh my gosh, you're here, you're alive. That's all that matters, right now. You know, the other that weren't so common was the one person who was the first person on scene and to open the door to, like, he was scared to death to see what he would find. He said, I'm here. And the moment when someone says, I'm here, we're gonna help you and take care of you. And when you are approached with that energy, and then he says, okay, you're gonna be all right, I'm here, that I think the phrase you're going to be okay then kind of is surrounded with warmth instead of just you're fine.
Okay, so in the first scenario where most people were like, you're okay, it's all okay, how did you feel?
I kind of was, well, shocked. I felt shocked too. My judgment was, no, I'm not. That was my other judgment of feeling.
So did you feel like misunderstood or like isolated?
Just maybe just needed to be heard.
Needed to be heard. Yeah.
Feeling
so
that go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering if you felt connected with the people who were like, everything's going to be okay, you're okay.
The guy who showed up first, I was connected with.
So the one who said, I am here, but not the others?
The second person who had come up to my side of the window, she was the one that said, you're okay, you're okay. There probably was a little bit of difference, but the thing is, I also had compassion in that moment too, for that she didn't know what to do. Who knows what to do in that situation? So I was like,
let's focus on like your raw emotions. So without, and for sure, like with your training in NVC, it makes perfect sense that you would feel compassion for others and be like, of course you don't know how to show up. Like you don't have the training or, whatnot. But like, yeah, Carrie asked, like, did you feel annoyed or irritated? What were some of your like initial knee-jerk emotions?
I just shocked. I mean, because that was the moment where, I mean, my car had just stopped spinning. I mean, there was nothing else to really process other than like, I'm scared. I mean, that was like one of the first words I said when I opened the door. So definitely afraid, feeling shocked. I don't think I could process anything about being angry or annoyed or irritated, though looking back at it now, it's like, well, that those feelings are very valid to be like, wait, what are you saying? I'm okay. Like, I mean, there was no blood on my face. There wasn't any broken bones. If I did have something physically wrong with me, meaning like some sort of open wound, then I think that I might have had maybe different feelings about her statement to me.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. And the person who said, I'm here.
Yes.
Panic and anxiety for sure. Yep.
Thanks, Emily. Yep.
Yeah. And so you felt the warmth for the person who said, I'm here. Yeah. It sounds like you felt comforted.
Yeah. He just like looked at me with almost all needs met in like one look. It was crazy.
Aw,
Yeah.
yeah. Interesting. All needs met in one look. So what did that look like for you? Like, which needs of yours were met with his look?
Trust,
Okay.
reassurance. Yep.
Reassurance, yep.
And calm.
Calm.
Yep. Safe, even though
Safe.
the situation wasn't necessarily safe, but his
You felt
presence.
safe enough, it sounds like, with him and his
Yep,
presence.
safe enough. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. I love that. I love that you bring that up because that's the biggest thing that, like, my experience of emotional crisis, both my own and others, is safety, like feeling safe enough to process emotions is what's required to be supported. And what most people will do is try to fix the emotion. You're okay, calm down, it's going to be all right. So this fixing, what it does is it makes it so it feels less safe to be with your own emotion. Like, oh, I shouldn't feel shocked or anxious or afraid right now. I don't have blood on me. I haven't, like, I'm not dead. So maybe I shouldn't feel these things. And that's kind of the message that when somebody is trying to fix it for you, you're going to be okay. That's the message they're giving. Does that resonate?
Yes. Yeah. I felt safe enough to be able to release my emotions. I later, as he like got me out of the car, he hugged me. I mean, that's all I could think to do, because I
Yeah.
filled with so much adrenaline that I couldn't sit down. Like there was just no sitting for me. I actually wanted to like pick up everything and like keep moving my body because I couldn't. I mean, it just couldn't function. But when he held me, I was able to look at the car and then just allow tears and crying and all of the things that I was feeling in my body just like release and come out.
Yeah.
Because I did feel safe enough with him, because he did immediately said the right things in that moment so that I could feel safe enough to be able to process that, or at least do whatever processing my brain is doing at that moment.
Right. And it wasn't just that he said the right things, like he showed that I am here with you. He held space for you. He helped you get out of the car.
Yes.
So it wasn't just like, okay, I'm here, but really he's freaking out going like, I need to fix you. It's like, I've got you. It's okay. We're like, you can have your experience in this container. And so he was holding space for you.
Yeah, 100% holding space. And it was incredible how he had the knowledge of that. And he was like the angel.
And the capacity.
Because he also had a little bit of background, even though this was his first on-site scene at car accident. He's also volunteered in the firefighting, so he's seen some things. Didn't have the knowledge like maybe common other people have not. So yeah, he was able to show up in a way and be present in a way that was very there, and the capacity. He had some kind of background or tools that he was able to provide for me in that moment.
Cool. Okay. I love it. So that is the thing we're going to go into. Thank you so much for sharing, Katie.
You're welcome.
That's the thing we're going to go into, is how do we create that capacity within ourselves to then support other people. So I'll share a story first to demonstrate why earlier I said, like, we have to feel safe enough with our own emotions to be able to support other people's emotions. So my experience growing up, my experience with people who were upset. So my mom would get really upset with my dad, and then she would leave the house and sometimes be gone for days. And sometimes we would find her in the hospital because she had tried to commit suicide. So that was a huge, for me, what it did in my nervous system was I associated big upset emotions with death. And so I could not hold space for other people who were having big emotions, who were really angry or really sad or feeling very hurt or isolated. I could not hold that because I was so triggered in my body that I couldn't even go there. So I did not have enough safety in my nervous system to hold space for her. And so when we talk about capacity, like some of the folks who may have tried to help, they couldn't hold space for you because they, their own reasons, right? Like maybe they had a car accident previously. Maybe they had somebody who died previously, and they just like, oh my God, I have to fix this. It's an emergency for me. So when we create a safe enough space within our own nervous systems, then we can hold space for other people. So there's two ingredients to creating safety within ourselves, and that is a space of non-judgment and emotional boundaries. So has everybody heard of the term enmeshment? Yeah? Okay. So, and for those who haven't, or maybe those who are watching, you haven't heard that term, enmeshment is where two or more people are emotionally tied together, and they don't, thank you, Carrie. So in this context, emotional enmeshment is like your feelings become my feelings, and my feelings are your feelings. There's no definition between my feelings and your feelings. And so, for instance, with my mom, when she would get upset, I would feel upset. And like if she was angry, I would feel angry, or I would feel afraid. I would think that I did something wrong. That's the biggest part of enmeshment, is when somebody else is upset, I think it's my fault. So I have then self-judgment. Oh my God, what did I do? And then it goes to like, do I deserve love? Do I belong? Am I safe? And in that, then I have the emotional crisis. And so, Carrie, you mentioned earlier, like your expectation is that we'll learn how to hold space for others without getting sucked into their emotions. Boundaries is how we do that. So when we've had experience of enmeshment, especially in our early life, it's a practice of separating yourself from the other person enough to say, I'm feeling angry. Okay, interesting. Why am I angry? you're feeling angry. Oh, interesting. That's your anger. I wonder why you're angry. Instead of like, you're angry, I'm angry. Holy shit. Or like, you're upset, I'm upset. And so when the knee-jerk reaction is I want to fix you, it's usually because I don't feel safe enough for you to feel your emotions. So, and yet, Emily, you mentioned around kids, there's definitely that attachment. And I can't yet speak to kids fully because I don't have them. So I'm only guessing around your kids. You know, I know the parent-child connection is so strong that I don't quite have that experience. So, but with other family members, I can speak to that. And like for my parents, I was absolutely, I thought every emotion they had was my fault. What did I do? And oftentimes they made it my fault. Like they doled out pain and punishment when they were upset. And so I associated anger with pain in that case for my dad, especially because he used punishment a lot. And so does anybody have you all had some practice in developing some safety for yourself and your own emotions? You can just pop that into the chat box. And if anybody wants to share, you're welcome to speak up as well.
It's actually a little easier just to speak. I would say that I'm only just now getting some understanding about the relationship of me with another, the enmeshment thing you're speaking about. But I don't, I would say I'm just like a yellow belt right now.
Cool. Yeah. And what so far has helped? Like, if anything, what has helped?
I attend the NVC practice sessions that Katie does, and having that close community and having that working model. Also, my husband is pretty proficient at NVC, so we kind of have that dialogue going on when we need to. And then and then in the last year, I've taken up light yoga, light meditation. So those are just
yeah, so
been really healthy things leading me in this direction, because it's been a real big problem for a long time.
Okay, yeah. So for those who don't know NVC, that's nonviolent communication. And what is it about the NVC model that has really helped you, Carrie?
Boy, there's this freedom of judgment, or freedom from not judging as much. Yeah, there's a lot more freedom of choice, because I'm as soon as I can name one of the emotions that I'm having, as soon as I can link it to a need that I think fits the situation, and then coming up with just little strategies. There's just a lot of choice. It's easy for me to start to recognize there's multiple strategies for how to not necessarily fix the emotion or meet the need directly, but to help. There's just a lot of freedom in it. And I like not being so judgmental too. I'm still really, really judgmental, but I'm like really like not being as much.
Yeah. And isn't it to yourself and others? Absolutely. Because there's really no judgment on others without judgment on yourself. Like it's kind of impossible. Like even even folks I know who we might label as narcissistic, they have, my experience of them is that they have so much fear of failure that they cannot fail. And so they create scenarios in their own mind where it's not their fault. They haven't failed. There's no mistake they've ever made. But it's because it's so, like, their association of failure is so painful they can't take it. And so, like, the creating enough safety to hold space for another person's emotions, removing the judgment from our own emotions is the foundational step there. Because if I am afraid of being angry, let's say, because that used to be for me, I was afraid of harming another person if I was angry. And so then if another person's angry, I'm instantly thinking like, oh, they might harm me, or they might harm themselves, or they might harm somebody else. And so I had to fix that emotion so they weren't angry so that I can be safe. And then when I learned to sit with my anger and let it be in my body and just take up space and recognize that my emotion and my reaction, like the action that I take based on that emotion, are separate. That's where choice belongs. When you talk about choice, Carrie, it's you've been able to name the emotion, so you've taken the judgment away as much as possible. You name the emotion, you find that underlying need for the emotion, and then you can create a better strategy. So instead of this knee-jerk reaction of, let's say maybe yelling at a person or hitting a person, which is what I did as a kid, you can think, okay, you're more in your prefrontal cortex because you have some understanding. You're not as in fight or flight mode. So that creates more choice and freedom for you. And when you have that choice and freedom, so does the other person. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to read through some of these notes. Thank you all so much for sharing. It looks like yeah, so Emily getting really upset when your daughter was crying and upset. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that the thing, like, as she's crying and upset, it's sort of a similar situation for like my feeling unsafe around anger. So there's something that you, like, there's a judgment you have on yourself for being upset that that feels unsafe. That's my guess. And so then when she's crying because she's really upset, you need to fix her right away to have her stop doing that. And this is totally normal. So, like, no judgment. In a culture where emotions are suppressed, which ours is based in that, you know, we're kind of coming out of it now, but our culture, most of us have been taught that emotions are not okay, that we sort of have to repress them and stuff them down until we can't anymore, and then they explode. And so then our experience is danger. And so that reinforces the idea that emotions are not okay. But if instead we can be like, okay, I feel upset, just like, oh, there's a flower on that tree, or there's this branch that's doing a weird thing on that tree. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just there. All emotions are there to bring us information, a kind of information that our brains don't have full access to. So those emotions are useful, they're needful. And if we're willing to sit with them and create space in our own bodies, then we can find the information they have for us and create more choice around how we respond. And that is how you hold space for another person. So let's say in this example you gave, Emily, of your daughter crying and getting really upset, if you were able to hold space for your feelings of upsetness and you didn't feel triggered by it, you might then be able to say, oh, that's really upsetting for you. I see that. Yeah, you just broke that bowl and that must have been scary. Probably she would have been like, yeah, that was really scary. And so oftentimes a person who's feeling a big emotion, they only need it named and that it's okay for them to feel it and to identify why they feel it. Like, you just broke that bowl. You must be scared, or that must have been shocking, or whatever it might be for her. You can guess. You might guess wrong, and that's okay. You can keep guessing. But like Carrie, you shared that when you identify your emotion and then you identify the need, you have more choice and freedom to find the strategy to meet it, but like you feel calmer, right? And so when you can do that for somebody else, name their feeling and help them identify that need, they feel calmer. But it's not your job to make the emotion go away. We don't want the emotion to go away. It's okay to be there. And in fact, when we let it be there, that's when the magic happens, because that's when we find the need that's underlying it. Yeah, I love that example, Emily.
I love that example too, because I'm thinking of my little nephew who's 4 and my niece who's almost a year, I think. And I know that I've seen the parents try to alter the negative or difficult emotions of the children. Of course, it's just so instinctive. Like, you see a baby crying and they won't stop.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't know, it's probably common to worry, do they have a stomach ache, or do they have like, something obstructing their intestine or something? But yeah, I think I share that. My brother and I came from a family where the bad emotions were bad, and it's like I'm the one in the family who's like, no, they're actually useful. And so I want to like try to find some way to encourage my brother especially to just roll with the emotions that his son is having that are like really hard to deal with. Like, gosh, I don't want to judge him though, because it's a lot of strong emotions. So
yeah. And that judgment, like the bad emotions are bad. So right there, it's like shame, 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 shame. And when we're in shame, we're like the activity goes away from our prefrontal cortex, which is the ability to think clearly, and goes into our amygdala, which is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so with that judgment, like bad emotions, are there bad emotions? I think there are non-supportive actions we can take. If I hit my child because they're screaming, like that can cause them harm. But it's not the emotion, theirs or mine, that's harming. It's my action that's harming them. So it's the strategy. And if I can sit with my emotion and their emotion enough to find the need, I'm not going to do a knee-jerk reaction to fight or run away or ball up and like go inside and hide. So, and yeah, for kids, Tamara, I appreciate that you bring that up, that children are naturally enmeshed because they are learning who they are. And of course, like right now, me and my baby, we are one creature, literally. Like, I mean, it's definitely growing inside me, but we share our air and our blood, and like we are enmeshed physically. So of course, when they're born, they're still going to be enmeshed for a while. And that's where it's our job to help them identify their feelings and needs and to model that by sharing our own feelings and needs. Like, oh, I'm really upset right now because I'm tired. When I model that, then they have the opportunity to then think about it for themselves. And at first, in the first couple of years, that's not going to make sense to their growing brain yet. But the more I can model that for them, then they learn and they don't stay enmeshed. Whereas if I'm upset and I'm like, go to your room, I need to sleep. And I haven't acknowledged that I am upset because I am tired and I need quiet or something, then they think it's their fault and they stay enmeshed. So I really appreciate that you bring that up, Tamara. Yeah, breathing, Emily, love it. Anything that can help us create a sense of safety in our own body. Breathing is a great way because it signals to our nervous system that we're not being chased. It's like, okay, if I take a deep breath, my body knows I'm not running from a tiger. So that's a great tool. Another one is somatic dialogue, which I've taught in previous classes. So those who are interested, you can go back. I think it was class 2 or maybe 3. I taught somatic dialogue. And that's where you embody your own emotions. Just a quick, how to do that. You pay attention to your breathing and then notice your sensations in your body, feel the sensations, and you let them get bigger. That's the key. So if I feel pain in my shoulder, for example, I'm going to imagine that pain getting bigger and I'll breathe into it. And then after I do that with the sensations of my body, then I think, okay, what emotion am I feeling right now? So let's say I feel grief. Okay, where is that grief in my body? Oh, it's in my heart. All right. Let that grief get bigger. Breathe into it. I imagine it's surrounding me and I'm at the center of it. So I'm allowing it space instead of resisting and trying to fix it and control it. I'm just letting it be there, breathing into it. And then I see, is there any other emotion? Okay, after I've created space for it, then I can say, okay, what is that emotion wanting to tell me? What is it needing? Oh, that grief needs me to just feel it. Okay. Or that grief is telling me I really love that person I lost. Yeah, of course I'm feeling grief. So then I can create understanding for myself in that emotion. And then I can find out if there's anything I'm needing now. So as I dive deeper and again give it space, then I can get more and more information and then I can act on it. This is exactly what we do with another person who's having an emotional crisis. Give them space and help them feel safe enough to feel their emotion until they can find their underlying need. Now, of course, if that person is having an emotional crisis and they're blaming you or judging you, that's going to be harder. If they're having a big emotional response to one of your actions, that's especially going to be harder. Not insurmountable, but just harder. So, but they're still, you can name wow, you're really angry because I walked out on you the other day. Yeah, I feel really angry too. I'm sorry. And so you can acknowledge your actions. Recently, my sweetheart did something that especially with my big pregnancy emotions, I just felt just huge sadness and loneliness and grief and totally rejected him. Like, he tried to support me and I'm just like, nope. And I felt a lot of anger. And what he did was gave me space. He's like, yeah, I know you're collecting your thoughts right now. Here's what I did. Here's what I plan to do differently next time. When you're ready, I'm totally available to talk. And so he acknowledged his actions. He acknowledged my feelings, and he invited me back to a conversation. And I was so upset that I still, when we got together, he asked, do you want a hug? And I was like, not now, not yet. Because I still didn't feel that, like, I still felt all the anger and the grief. And he's like, okay, and sat with me and we talked. And then he kept giving me signs of invitation, like, okay, it's all right. And eventually, especially, we went to we were at a midwife appointment, and my midwife was like, it's totally normal to feel all these feelings, they're much bigger. And I was like, oh, okay. So I created more understanding for myself. And then I was really able to change the stories in my head. So I was able to relieve some of that self-rejection for my big feelings. Because like now I especially feel, I feel more attached. I need more attachment. And so my judgment is like, oh, I'm needy. I'm bad. Because I'm an independent woman. I shouldn't be needy. So there's that judgment. And then what happened is I rejected him because of that story I had about myself and my big emotions. And so when I accepted my own emotions, I was able to receive his love and support that he was trying to give me. And so if he had taken it personally and either tried to fix my emotions by being like, look, can't you see I'm trying to help you? Or being like, fine, if you don't want my support and love, I'm out. None of that would have worked. It would have made it worse for both of us. But he understood why I was upset. And he had already named the emotion. I had named it. And so he was able to keep his boundaries, his emotional boundary, and be like, that's your emotion. This is my action. I owned it. Cool. That's your emotion. And it's okay. You can have space for that. And then I was able to come around. So that's how you would work with somebody's big emotion if it's about you. If it's about somebody or something else, it's much easier because they're not rejecting you. They're much more likely to receive your support and love if they feel safe enough. And if you feel safe enough, it helps them feel safe enough. So yeah, the judgment is huge. And so that's our work. It's my work to remove judgment of my own emotions so that I can not only support other people who are having big emotions, but receive support when I'm having them. Yeah. Yes. So sometimes our intense feelings are triggers of a traumatized nervous system. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. So my emotional response to what my sweetheart did was for sure a trigger response. It was based in the first time my mom left for 2 weeks when I was like 5, and I felt abandoned. And I felt like totally uncertain. I felt totally unsafe because the other adults around me were not safe. And so even though I had worked through a lot of this stuff, I guess being pregnant, a lot of it comes back up bigger. And so it's sort of like dredging into my nervous system and pulling out what's still there, even in little bits. And so, yeah, Tamara, thank you for bringing that up, that being triggered from a traumatized nervous system. And that's part of the holding space and compassion that I need to have for myself, and that whoever's supporting me can have for me. And the thing is, when you do your work to name your emotions and develop understanding for your needs, then you can communicate that to the people who love you and want to support you, so that you can teach them how to support you. You can help guide them. So that's basically the way to help with emotional crisis. So if I was to break it down into a summary, it is create space in your body for your emotions so that you're not triggered by them, or that when you do get triggered by them, you have more choice on how to respond. And you do that by changing the judgments you have about yourself, or the shame. And this can, like, it's not easy, because we're just mired in a culture and a mental model of pain and shame and judgment and right and wrong. And so we're sort of battling, or we're swimming upriver in a way. And so if it's hard, it's just hard. That's okay. It's still doable. It just takes time and oftentimes a lot of support. I've had so much support over the years from therapists and counselors and coaches and healers. Like, without that support, I'm certain I wouldn't be here with the capacity to hold the space that I do now. So getting support is critical, and it doesn't mean you're weak. That judgment voice again, the shame voice. It means you're a human in this culture that is not supporting emotions, which is part of being human. So when you release that judgment of yourself and learn to identify your feelings and needs and hold space for them, then you can do the same for others. And as you name their emotion and find out their needs, that creates those emotional boundaries. So you're not like, oh, it's my fault. You're like, okay, that's what you're feeling and needing. That's okay. You create space for them. And so one of my clients, the way that she describes this, or she does this with her child, she calls it sports casting. So she will name the emotion and the action and then validate her child's feeling. So let's say her brother or one of her children, her older boy, like, hit the younger boy because maybe the younger boy broke his toy or something like that. Then she might tell her older boy, like, oh, you feel angry because your brother just broke your toy. Well, that makes sense that you feel angry. It's not okay to hit your brother, but it's okay to feel angry. Your toy was broken. Let's think of a different way to react next time. So it's just that naming, holding space. It's okay to feel that. And then we can adjust the action. That, and again, Carrie, what you brought up with the choice, how to respond. Yeah. Are there any questions or comments that y'all would like to make? And you can pop that into the chat box or just speak up.
I have something. Maybe it would be too long of a project, but I just had the epiphany that my brother struggles with the complicated emotions and seeing them in others, including his son and stuff, possibly because he saw such big emotions in me growing up, and those scared him.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
like I'm like brainstorming ways to try to apologize to him or something and say, hey, I
Okay.
think there's something here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, that makes sense. So it sounds like you're feeling some guilt about reacting in strong ways that might have been harmful or non-supportive to your brother when you had strong emotional responses. And you would like to find a way to apologize and to take ownership for that.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. So however you do that, there's a concept of repair in relationships. And that's when we do something that is harmful to the other person, we acknowledge it and ask what we could do differently next time, or apologize, but we're taking ownership of our part and acknowledging how that affected the other person. And that repair makes the relationship stronger than it would have been if there was no hurt in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I would like to be close to my brother. So
yeah.
really
So you acknowledging this, I think, will help you feel closer to your brother. And there's no right way to do it. There's the way that you come up with that you think is best, and then it's an experiment. The biggest thing, though, is to take the shame away from yourself. So just to recap real quick about shame and guilt. Guilt is, I have done something that doesn't match my values or that hurt another person, and I would like to do something differently next time. Shame is, I have done something that hurt another person, therefore I am bad. And when we get stuck in shame, it's really hard to get out, because then we're in the shame spiral, we're out of our prefrontal cortex and into the amygdala, we're in fight, flight, or freeze. So working with yourself to detach that shame from your experience and recognize, oh, this thing that I did, I didn't like that. That wasn't how I want to behave. Mm-hmm. This is how I prefer to behave. And you decide that.
I'm writing this down.
And from there, experiment, and you will find some ways to reconnect with him.
Thank you.
I love it. Yeah. Okay. So what I would love to hear from each of you in just a couple of minutes, where if anybody has to leave, it's 11 o'clock, go ahead and pop off. And for anybody who wants to stay on, I would love to hear what your biggest takeaway is from today and how you would like to apply it in your life. You can either write that in the chat box or tell us.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So what I'd love to hear or read is what your biggest takeaway was today and how you would like to apply it in your life.
Mine would probably just be trying not to have any kind of judgmental, immediate thought, and try to remind myself to not judge.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so it's easier for our brain to attach to something that we will do instead of trying to not do something. So what can you replace the judgment with? Yeah, Carrie. Taking responsibility for your actions and allowing separateness, like recognizing separateness is okay so that the other person can feel their feelings. Yeah. I'm glad that model worked for you. Helped you see that.
Yeah, I agree with that, Carrie. The takeaway I had too, just about like what you just said, was there's a healthy boundary of which we kind of put our emotions, judgments when something is like crazy or in a crisis to the side just for now, not forever, so that we can show up and be present for that other person. Because when we're flooded with a lot of feelings, all of that can also bleed into the situation that's going on. So being able to have that healthy and know that like we're not separating from ourselves, we're not separating from the other person, we're creating this healthy way of capacity to be present. And I definitely see the enmeshment really hard when it comes to my dad, or when it was my mom before she passed. So to get caught up in the dance of what we argument or fight or whatever it is, to feed off of that energy that we have, it was very difficult to create that spaciousness so that I could regulate and come back to the conversation, whereas my dad is not used to that. So it's a practice, tell you what, and it's the smallest of molecule of ways to find that spaciousness or that capacity to either step away, to create that for ourselves before we come back to mend and repair and have a conversation. My family, my dad, they're not used to that. They're just not. And
Yeah.
just those tiny moments actually build up to being better at it, or have the capacity for, or put my hands here on my heart versus here. So thank you for those takeaways.
Yeah.
It was really good to understand that there's a healthy way to approach that.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I found with like when you need to take time and space away, it's really helpful to let the other person know, like, I am too upset right now. I am going to go calm down and I will be back. We can have this conversation later. So you set up their expectation, and they're not freaking out thinking like, oh shit, what's going to happen? So you help them just know what your intention is.
Yes.
Yeah, taking space can be so critical sometimes.
Yeah, Marshall talks a lot about that. And I've been on both ends of that time, where someone just wouldn't come back with a time to come back to it. And I'm just sitting here like ruminating and flustered. And then the other part is when I take space with my dad, that's almost like he's rejected or abandoned, right? He feels this like, oh my God, she walks away all the time. And that's the thing I need to also practice, is saying, hey, I'm going to go take some time. I need 15 minutes. I will be right back, to finish this.
For sure.
He doesn't feel left handed.
Yes. And that's taking ownership of your feelings. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So we have one question here that is, what if someone weaponizes or uses an emotion to manipulate, intentionally or not, manipulate others to hold space? Or so let's see. Oh yeah. How do we hold space and set healthy boundaries while being present with those emotions? Okay. So part of boundaries is knowing what you're available for and not. Here's the thing. You do not have to be available. End of story. You do not have to be available, ever or now. There may be consequences of not being available. Maybe that person is like, fine, I'm out. And so if it's manipulation, we're like, well, you did this wrong to me, so you have to be available to fix it. No, you don't. No. It goes back to the mental model of right, wrong, good, and bad. If they are viewing you as an enemy, and you are viewing yourself as an enemy, then the manipulation works. Like you're buying into that mental model, and you're saying like, okay, now I deserve punishment because I've done this thing. Well, no. Understanding and acknowledgement is one thing. but pain and punishment isn't. And so I'll give you another example. And again, anybody who needs to leave, we're going over a little time, but for those who want to stay, go ahead. Another example. So again, with my sweetheart, he's held so much space for him. I just have so much appreciation with my big pregnancy emotions. But at one point I was really angry because triggers around bodily autonomy were coming up when we were discussing the birth plan. And just some different things came up where I felt that I was being forced by, not necessarily him, but just like expectations to use to go to the hospital instead of doing a home birth, or let's say if I have a breech birth, I have to, like, it has to be a cesarean section. So there's this stuff that like triggered for me. I felt out of control and like I didn't have bodily autonomy. And I was really angry. And there was, again, something Jeffrey did that that was a mistake on his part, but like my response was much bigger than it would have otherwise been. And I totally ignored him and his attempts to make an apology. I ignored him for like 5 hours. And his response was beautiful. He messaged me and said, hey, when I give an apology for an honest mistake and you reject it or ignore me, I don't feel safe with you. Will you please respond to me? And I called him right away and I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I'm so sorry. I totally want you to feel safe with me. So part of that strategy in setting boundaries is advocating for your needs also. So he advocated for his need for safety. And without that, if it was all about me in this relationship, it wouldn't be a relationship. It would be like, well, I mean, it would be more of a codependency than like an interdependent relationship. So I hope that's helpful in setting boundaries for yourself, not getting caught up in the you have to or you're obligated, but being willing to take ownership of whatever your part was and then advocate for your needs too. All right, I'm going to read a couple more of these and we'll wrap up. Yeah, so a takeaway here is noticing that all parts of a person's tree, like our emotions as a tree, it's like, okay, they're here, they're normal and natural, and holding space. Yeah. Replacing judgment, yeah, by reminding yourself that we're all human and that they're human. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, so if somebody mentioned here that if another person's favorite strategy to get their needs met doesn't work for you, they need to seek someone else to fulfill that strategy. And so when we're in a partnership, we collaborate on the strategy for how to get the needs met instead of demanding that those needs get met in a specific way. So I like to say, like, don't be married to your strategy. Be married to your emotions and your needs. Like, those are the things that are like true and yours, and the strategy can change. And if somebody's strategy doesn't work for you, you don't have to participate. And that's part of radical accountability. Yes, I love that, Emily, that you bring that up. Allowing for ourselves and what positions we're in. Yeah, we allow choice for ourselves and for others. Yes, love it. Cool. Thank you all so much for your participation. I'm glad you got a lot out of it. It sounds like you have. And the next class we have, we're gonna do a Saturday again. Saturdays seem to work really well. It's gonna be July 9th, and that class will be on teaching you how to train your loved ones how to treat you through empathy, clarity, and advocacy. So July 9th, here in a week or two, I will send that. I will send the registration link out for anybody who wants that. And I will see you all later. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Adina. Big hugs.
You're welcome, Katie. Thank you.
Good to see everybody.